Hello, this is Michael Raleigh with Close to My Heart, and today I'm going to walk you through the steps of creating this peacock card. The Elegant Peacock card is a two-step stamping process, and we're also going to use the Charming Border stamp set. The colors I have chosen for my peacock include Carolina, Sapphire, Lagoon, Sweet Leaf, and Willow. There's also a tad bit of saffron in there as well. So I'm going to begin with the Sapphire ink, and I'm going to use the outlined stamp to begin with of the peacock's head, and I will ink that up and then stamp that on my white daisy cardstock. And then I'll get the lined image of the peacock's tail, and I'll add that also to the stamp that on the cardstock and lining that up. Now it's easy to line up, especially if you can kind of stand above your stamping time. I was a little bit inhibited by that because I didn't want to put my head in front of the camera and block your view. Next, I'm going to stamp the fill in for the head of the peacock. And I started by inking the full stamp with the Carolina ink, and then I did a rock and roll technique with the Lagoon. So I get a darker outline around the edge. I'm going to do the same kind of technique with the Sweet Leaf and the Willow ink. So I will ink up my full stamp with the Sweet Leaf ink, and then I'll do a little rock and roll on the edges in the Willow ink. So I'll have some darker areas around the edge. And then I line that up with my peacock's tail, and I'll ink that down. And again, you will have better luck if you're kind of standing up above over your stamp as you're doing that. And there you go. You see the two different colors. It's kind of dark on the edges. Now that I have that done, I have also want to show you how to stamp and get a multicolored tail. So first, I'm turning the stamp over on the block, so I'm using the flat back side of the stamp. And I'm going to stamp that first in my Sweet Leaf ink, and then next in my Willow ink. And then finally, I'll roll it again the third time in the Lagoon ink. So, and as I'm doing that, it's hard to tell in the video, but I'm just kind of rolling the edges in there. It looks like I'm pressing straight down, but you'll see the color difference as I create these long feathers. So it's hard to see there, that is multicolored there. I'm just going to wipe off with a very, very damp cloth. Re-ink in Sweet Leaf, roll the edge in Willow and the other edge in Lagoon. There's my second one. You can see quite the variation in color on that one. And then I'm going to do a third one with the same technique and just try to, again, make it a variegated color. There you go. So those will be the tail feathers that we will cut out for our peacock. Now I'm going to flip that stamp over, so now the lined image is up, and I'm going to use the Sapphire ink as I did above for the lined images and stamp right over top of those tail feathers. And you can see how that turns out. I can still see the color underneath. They're all three kind of a different color, which is exactly how it would be in nature. And there I have three tail feathers. I also want to add some extra color to the Be Beautiful card. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ink that up first in my Lagoon ink, and then very carefully, just using the edge of the Sapphire ink pad, I'm going to dip the bottom part of that sentiment into the Sapphire ink. And then I'm going to stamp that on the side up in the corner because I'll cut that out later. So I will have it as a sentiment on my card. The first card you saw in the beginning didn't have this variegated sentiment, but I decided to do that. And you can see there that it's two different colors. Now, the peacock tail has two stamps that can stamp over top, adding the detail for the peacock, the eye of the peacock feathers. So here I'm going to use the saffron and I'm going to line that up. Now again, it can be a little tricky unless you're over top. You can see my head kind of get in the camera there. And I'm going to line that up and stamp that in the saffron ink. And then I'm going to take the other detailed piece, dip that in the lagoon ink and add that color. Now, if you find this a little tricky, as I do, you can either practice this a lot or you can use your markers. Here I'm using the Marigold Shinhan marker color, and I'm just going back and adding in a little bit more color where that saffron was so that I can get the full effects of the coloring. I also did that on my tail feathers and brought in some of that marigold color as well. And those Shinhan markers do color nicely over top of color. They're not as vibrant, but you will also get a nice color with that. And then I used the marker that's closest to peacock in color. I'm not remembering the name right now. And I went back and also added a little bit of detail with that marker. Now you can see how shimmery and gold this sample is that I have here. And to get that shimmer and the gold, I used the gold shimmer pen that Close to My Heart has, and I just colored that tail in with the brush, adding that gold shimmer over top of the color. Now it looks pretty yellow there, and that's just the light catching all of that gold. But really, you can see the color popping out from underneath pretty easily. I also am going to use that on the tail feathers that I have there, just to brighten them up a little bit with that shimmer. It's a very pretty effect with this peacock. Now on the first card I showed you at the beginning, instead of using the shimmer brush and the markers, I actually used the markers and colored my bitty sparkles and medium sparkles with the marigold marker, and then I added those as the detail. So you have a couple of options in how you want to add that sparkle to your card. Now here I'm adding just a clear shimmer brush over the peacock's head and body. And that just makes it a different color, still shiny, but it doesn't have that bright gold look to it. For my card edge, I wanted to also take on that multicolor look. So first I stamped in my Sweet Leaf ink, and then I stamped 2/3 of the stamp on the edge in the Lagoon ink. You can see I'm carefully kind of lining that up. And then finally, I just took the very edge, bottom edge of that stamp and ran it across my sapphire ink. And when I stamp that down, you're going to see that I have a 3-toned edge or base for the card. Now I'm just showing you a sample here. I will be stamping that directly on the card base when I do that, but I wanted you to see how that looks. Isn't it beautiful, just all those colors? Now I played with this a little bit and I did 2-tone. That middle one there is a mistake. I made some errors on that one. And then I did the 3-tone again. And here in the original card, I just did the sapphire blue. So you have lots of options with that. Now I cut out everything using our fine tip microtip scissors, and as I'm cutting you can see I'm turning the paper and not really turning the scissors, and this allows me to get right up to the edge and have some good control as I'm cutting out. Now I'm not going to show you cutting out all of this because that's kind of boring to watch through this whole video, but you can see I have cut out all my pieces there. I noticed that I had a little extra white at the bottom of my feathers, so I just took my green marker and just kind of colored that in again to make it a solid look for the feathers on the bottom. There's my peacock and the feathers. So using the thin 3D foam tape, I'm going to use that on the back of my peacock so that he's just kind of popped very slightly up off my card. And I'm using that foam tape and keeping it up above on the body and the top part of the tail feathers. And as I put it on my card, then I'm able to tuck the tail feathers underneath the bigger tail feathers that we colored separately. The perfect placement, making sure that I have room enough for his tail feathers. And then I'm going to put some adhesive on the back of each tail feather and just tuck that in under those tail feathers shown there. Can you see how I can lift that up a little bit off the page or off the card just so that gives me space to tuck those under and see how those fit. I'm using the dot adhesive from Close to My Heart. I like it. It's repositionable. So if those tail feathers aren't exactly where I want them, I can pull them out and redo them. Adding a little bit more of the glitter shimmer to the tail feathers, just to make sure that's kind of the same intensity as the tail. And now it's time to do that magic border on my card. So here I go again. I'm inking up in the sweet leaf. And then 2/3 of the stamp on the edge of the lagoon ink. And then finally, the very edge of that stamp across the sapphire. And then I line that up with my card, give it firm pressure all the way across. And ta-da! There it is. You can see that tri-colored border there. So beautiful. Now I'm going to cut out that beautiful that we stamped earlier, that's two-tone with the sapphire on the bottom. And I'm going to use the willow ink pad and just distress the edges a little bit so it'll stand out when it's on that white background. And then that will get tucked right there under the back of the peacock and onto the edge. Now, there's a lot of steps to this card, but they are fairly easy to do. And if you have any questions, please feel free to message me. I would love to help you with that.